Hi, welcome to the YDN Multimedia Room. I'm Kevin Kucharski from the Sports Desk. I'm here today with Charles Condro, sports reporter for the YDN, and John Ryan, sports director for the WYBC. We're bringing you the first part of a bi-weekly series, Power Ranking Ivy League Basketball. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
So far early in the season, it's been a little difficult to tell just how the league is going to shape up this year. The first conference matchups don't start till January 12th, so we've got a while till we see these teams go head-to-head. But today we're going to try to give you a look at how the league might shape up this season. First, we're going to start by looking at the top of the rankings. Let's start with you, Charles. Your number one team in the Ivy League, you ranked the Princeton Tigers. What makes you think that they're going to be able to dominate the conference this season?
Well, first and foremost, I believe they have probably the best player in the Ivy League. He's my pick to be the player of the year, and it's Ian Hummer. He's a 6'7" forward, senior. And one of the things he does is that he's not a one-dimensional player. He really does everything. He's averaging about 14.5 points a game, but he also has 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals a game. So he's really showing that he can play within the system. Another thing I like about this team is their point guard, T.J. Bray. He's a very big kid. He's 6'5", about 207 pounds. To put that in perspective, Justin Sears, who's 6'8" and the star of Yale's team, is only 200 pounds. So he's a really big kid. He's got a lefty shot, and that a lot of times gives him an advantage because people expect you to be righty when you play. So those two players really help this team on the offensive end. And then another thing that's been impressive is that they only allow paltry 57.4 points a game, and that's tops in the Ivy League right now. And the Ivy League is very much a low possession, defensive, grinded out league. So the fact that they've been able to play some pretty good teams like now number 4 Syracuse and still only allow that few points, points to them being a good team come the Ivy League season.
Great. Well, John, you dropped the Princeton Tigers down to number 2, and you've shown you prefer the Harvard Crimson in that number 1 spot. A lot of people thought they'd struggle this season after losing Brandon Curry and Kyle Casey. Why do you think they're still the team to beat in the Ivy League?
Well, I think they're still the team to beat, Kevin. You talk about the loss of Brandon Curry and Kyle Casey, and those are certainly huge losses for this Harvard Crimson team. But coming to the season, if they had those two players, I think they would clearly be the favorite going to the Ivy League season, and I think that the loss of them doesn't necessarily drop them from that spot. And the reason why is their offense. Averaging 71.1 points per game, 46% shooting, clearly the best in the Ivy League. No one else really even that close. And they've got a young team. They've got a guy, point guard named Siani Chambers, who's averaging 12.5 points, 5 assists a game this season. He's a freshman. He has a lot of time to develop. He'll develop a lot as the season goes on. And Harvard's weakness may be on the defensive end relative to how good their offense has been, but I think Coach Tommy Amaker has a lot of time to get the kinks worked out with this Harvard defense as they go into the Ivy League season.
Now, you told me when you gave me your rankings, you said Princeton has the best defense in the league and Harvard has the best offense in the league, and you went ahead and ranked Harvard number 1. Although people always say defense wins championships, why do you think Harvard's offense is more valuable than Princeton's defense this year?
Well, I think in this league, Princeton's going to win a lot of games just by shutting the other team down. And I think Harvard has the ability to compete, to put up points in the offensive end. And I'm not sure that Princeton can do that. Ian Hummer, clearly a great player and one of the favorites for Player of the Year. But besides that, they just don't have the offensive weapons that Harvard has. And you mentioned a lot of these teams play at a slow pace. Really, 7 of the 8 of them are in the bottom half of Division I college basketball in terms of possessions per game. So you're going to see a lot of slow games, and Harvard's one of those teams, 280th, 290th fastest team in terms of number of possessions in the nation. They're still averaging 71.1 points per game. So I think that shows really maybe how good their offense is, and in these close, grinded-out games, the team that's going to be able to convert on the offensive end at the end of the games, I think could have the advantage in the Ivy League this season.
Now, I think most people would agree that Harvard and Princeton are probably going to be 2 of the top teams in the league. A bit of disagreement between you two about Cornell. Charles, you put them at 2nd in your power rankings, and John, you dropped them down to 4th. They've had some tough games already. They played Wisconsin and Arizona State, but not really any big-time wins on the resume yet. Charles, what makes you think this Big Red team is ready to reemerge as an Ivy League power this year?
Well, first of all, when I was making my rankings, I really focused on sort of a what have you done for me lately kind of thing. And for that, I don't expect Harvard to be number 3 when we get towards the end of the season. But right now, what I really liked is the toughness of the non-conference schedule that Cornell's seen so far. They have the second toughest non-conference schedule in the Ivies after Princeton, and they've shown that they can play both inside and outside. Sean Miller is the leading scorer for them. He's a big guy, can play inside, but they also have two great young shooters, Nolan Kressler and Devin Cherry. Both are shooting more than 40% from beyond the arc, and so I like that about this team. They've got 9 guys who play 14 minutes or more, so they're very balanced in their scoring and in their play, and so basically that's really what it comes down to is they've played a much tougher schedule. When you look at strength of schedule, they're ranked over 100 places above Harvard right now. Harvard beat an impressive BC team. They had a 13-point win at BC. But other than that, they really haven't impressed me much so far. So I can see them going ahead of Cornell later in the season. But right now, I've got Cornell with a slight edge.
Great. Well, speaking of Ivy League teams playing tough opponents, John, we saw Columbia go get a big win against Villanova. That's a Big East team. And one of the biggest names in the Ivy League this season has been Brian Barber, the guard for the Columbia Lions. He's averaging 13.5 points a game this season. His assist-to-turnover ratio is excellent. Where do you think he can take the Lions this season?
Well, I think they've got the chance to compete for an Ivy League championship. Columbia, one of those dark horse picks coming into this season as a team that could perhaps win the Ivy League, and it really starts, like you said, with Brian Barber, senior guard. Reminds you a little bit of Zach Rosen a year ago at Penn. He's not quite the shooter that Rosen was. Doesn't really have the three-point shot that saw Rosen win Player of the Year last year in the Ivy League and be really one of the best point guards in the nation. But Barber has the potential to lead this team, and he's got some guys that can help him. Guys like Mark Sisko, Alex Rosenberg have been there before, going to be able to put up some points. And then a guy in Grant Mullen who's shooting 54% from three-pointers. They got a lot of weapons on this Columbia team. The question is, can they put it together? Coming from a program that really hasn't, we haven't seen them competing for Ivy League championships in the last few years.
And one team we have seen competing for those Ivy League championships consistently for decades has been the Penn Quakers. And I was a little surprised when I got both of your rankings. You both placed them in the bottom half of the league. What's the storyline for the Penn Quakers this season, Charles?
Yes. Well, we just talked about Zach Rosen, and I think when you lose a player of that caliber, it really hurts your team. He was, like John said, one of the best point guards in the nation, and without him, they've really struggled offensively and really controlling the basketball. They lead the Ivy League with 16.9 turnovers a game. And they just really haven't been impressive so far. They've played one of the weakest schedules in all of college basketball and are still only 2-6. And they're actually ranked in terms of RPI 342nd, which is pretty disappointing when you think about it. There are only 347 teams in Division I basketball. So they're really not only, in my opinion, the worst team right now in the league, but one of the worst in Division I.
But to respond to that, Charles, I think you have some guys on this team who really can step up and lead this Penn team. Fran Doherty already getting some talk about being the Ivy League, perhaps competing for Ivy League Player of the Year. Him and Miles Cartwright combining for more than half of Penn's points. They've got some experienced players, and while I don't think that this is the year they'll compete for an Ivy League championship, I don't think we can totally write them off. I think this league's wide open. It's actually, in terms of how the Ivy League is this year, one of the weaker leagues we've seen in the past 10, 15 years. So really a lot of opportunity for anyone to jump up and grab it.
Well, one team we're hoping can take advantage of that opportunity to jump up and grab it is the Yale Bulldogs. Yeah, Charles, you ranked them at 5th. John, you ranked them at 6th. Starting with you, Charles, what do you think this Yale team can do this year? And give us a little bit of an explanation for why you slotted them in at number 5.
Well, I slotted them in at number 5. I originally had them at number 6 until last night's 64-62 victory on the road at Bryant. And that was a very impressive win. Bryant had won 4 games in a row. They'd beaten Boston College themselves, and Yale was able to go on the road and stop them. They got a last-second buzzer-beating layup by Justin Sears, and that's how they got the win. And Sears is really one of the key pieces for Yale. He's such a young talent, and he's really shown. I talked to guard Mike Race today. He said he doesn't think of him as a freshman. He doesn't play like a freshman, and they really need that on a very young team. And not only do they need the young players to play sort of above their years, they really need the seniors to step up. And Austin Morgan has been very streaky from 3. And one thing I've sort of talked about is that he's not taking three-pointers just from the line. he's really taking very deep threes and a lot of ill-advised shots. So these players really need to come together and play within the system, take the shots that are given to them, not try and jack it up from long distance quite so often. And if they can do that, they've got enough talented pieces that they can make a run to the top half of this pretty wide-open league. But they haven't really shown me that yet.
And John, what would you say the Yale team has shown you this season so far?
They've definitely shown a lot of potential, but you've seen really good Yale, bad Yale, different things from this team at different times. On offense, at times they've been anemic, really just unable to put the ball in the hoop. Saw that against Hartford for extended periods of the game last Thursday, and then the Saturday before that against Army. In the first half, only 21 points, but they come out and both teams put on an offensive showcase in the second half and overtime. So, and going to your point, Charles, about Austin Morgan having to jack up some of these long threes, I think part of that's because the last couple of years, Yale's had clear number 1 and number 2 options in Reggie Wilhite and Greg Mangano, where if the shot clock's running down, you get those guys the ball, they can do something with it. And I think that's something that Yale's still looking for this year. Right now it's Austin Morgan, a guy who, as a senior, has a lot of experience and has the potential to go off, as we saw him score 28 points against Sacred Heart in the season opener. But can he be that guy night in, night out? I don't know if there's going to be a guy this season. If Yale's going to be successful, it's going to have to come, like you said, from sticking to the system, have different guys step up on different nights. We see Sam Martin really take a big leap up this year. He's shooting over 40% from 3. That's a huge jump up for him and really demonstrating a lot of leadership as the captain. Talked about Justin Sears, one of the best freshmen in the Ivy League so far this season. And they've got a lot of other pieces. Brandon Sherrod, and some nights can step up and be the guy. Jeremiah Kreisberg has been the guy at times in the past. So I'm actually excited about this Yale's team, their potential this season. I just think that we haven't quite seen enough yet where we can move them up into the top half of the league.
Great. Well, as you can see, the Ivy League is wide open this year, and we don't expect any team to jump to the top of these power rankings and stay there. To keep tuned into Ivy League basketball, keep watching our bi-weekly power rankings. For Charles Condro and John Ryan, thanks for tuning in.